to be frank, my major motion picture directing debut came about because First Contact, I'm sure, was offered to A-list action directors. I mean, we would have loved to have McTiernan or Ridley Scott, and I think they were, frankly, not that excited about doing Star Trek 8.
Action.
The date, data, I need the exact date.
April 4th, 2063.
At one point, I had to talk to someone who might have been involved in this project. Very talented individual, but they didn't know Star Trek.
Jonathan has been directing episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation and subsequently Voyager and Deep Space Nine since the second season, so it's been over 8 years.
You cannot begin from a state of absolute ignorance to try to familiarize someone with what Star Trek is. It just won't work.
Thanks to Rick Berman and to Patrick, who I think had a certain influence on who was going to direct the film. I mean, we all threw our hats into the ring, obviously. So it was really a gift.
One more time. Door stays open while Alfred's in the doorway. Thank you.
He was very hungry for this. He wanted it, and we knew he could do it, and we also knew that he would put in that extra mile that is needed to make the transition. This is a job that entails over a year of work, and sometimes you're working 80 hours a week. And I knew that he was committed to do that, and I knew his talents, and I also knew the fact that he was going to be one of the stars of the episode, and that he was going to be working with people who were very dear friends of his in terms of the other cast members would only make things better in this case.
I think that's a print on that one, Jerry.
I really worked well with Rick. We have very similar taste in actors and in storytelling. That didn't hurt. And also, my relationship with Patrick is strong, and I know that a movie is only going to work because he's the star of the movies.
Western Hemisphere.
If the director and the lead have some sort of simpatico.
Action.
One thing that no one else could have brought, which is the longest experience of being an actor directing his own fellow actors. So having Jonathan there has meant that we've had a knowledgeable, knowing individual who has Star Trek right down to his fingertips. But on top of that, a man with extraordinary energy, good humor, niceness, frankness, and talent for directing actors, which is quite extraordinary.
Fortunately, I had done a number of episodes that I had acted in prior to this, so it wasn't as unnerving as it might have been.
Action! Cameron!
I will say that the days that I had to work both as an actor and a director were a little more complicated and a little more all-consuming, and I had the good eyes of some of my co-workers to depend on if I was on camera.
We don't have time for this! Boom! Cut!
Jonathan is like, he's the cruise director,
Let's go get quick!
He's the viceroy in charge of fun, and so that helps a lot. And the way Jonathan directs is to really make that atmosphere on his set a comfortable one for everyone.
I mean, obviously, I was thrilled to have all the toys to play with and the budget and the schedule, to shoot 4 pages a day instead of 8 pages a day, to have high-end stunts and lots of extras and new sets, and we had the Borg.
I am the Borg.
Greetings. I am curious. Do you control the Borg Collective?
You imply a disparity where none exists. I am the collective. Jonathan is quite wonderful.
Y tus tráilers.
From a whole host of sort of perspectives. One, he has a kind of joy in the process that is so infectious. His sheer enjoyment of what he was doing was glorious to behold and just wonderful to be around. And also, coming as he does from an actor's place, he was very, very helpful to me as a director. He has a wonderful understanding of rhythm and of how to talk to an actor.
And then we had Alice Krieg, who somehow, in her vicious, heinous behavior, still managed to be alluring and sexy. And people were very disturbed, I think, by how attracted they were to the Borg Queen. And that's a great credit to her. And one of the great visual effects that I've ever been involved with was the separation of the Borg Queen from her body, where her spinal cord comes out of her and rises up. And and it worked not only because John Knoll and ILM and all the artists that worked on it are brilliant, but because Alice sold it. So a good actor makes a visual effect work better than it would if it's just an incredible technical feat. If an actor adds whatever it is that actors bring to the table, that's when magic happens.
You son of a bitch.
This really isn't the time.
Okay, I don't know jack about the 24th century, but everybody out there thinks that staying here and fighting the Borg is suicide. They're just afraid to come in here and say it.
The crew is accustomed to following my orders.
They're probably accustomed to your orders making sense.
None of them understand the Borg as I do. No one does.
He's one of the best directors I've ever worked with. And me and Jonathan are like hanging buddies from way back when we were young and drinking buddies. So in a way I feel this very motherly thing like, my God, look at you. I mean, and I've worked with like really good, big boys and girls.
Parker?
And Jonathan is right up there. It makes me feel like, whoa, I guess we're finally grown.
Action!
Alfre Woodard, my godmother, who was
You want to help me get me out of here?
never better than she was in that role. And as exciting as blowing things up was, and separating the Borg Queen from her body, and other things that was walking on the outside of the spaceship, what sits in my mind as one of my favorite memories as a director was sitting under the camera with my legs crossed and looking up and watching Patrick and Alfre duke it out in the observation lounge in that wonderful scene that ends with the glass breaking. It was 2 days of heaven with two seriously heavyweight actors just duking it out in the best sense of the word.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt your little quest. Captain Ahab has to go hunt his whale.
This is not about revenge.
Liar!
This is about saving the future of humanity.
Jean-Luc, blow up the damn ship!
No! No!
He knows what he's doing. He knows cinematically what he's doing. He respects his crew. They would do anything for him. He doesn't demonstrate and act out. He has a lot of fun, and he can tell an actor exactly what they need to hear to help them do what they can do. So I just, I've had a really, really great time.
Deanna! Deanna!
Well, no, don't turn off me!
Who is this jerk?
It's hard and it's great. It's hard because, you know, he's like a best friend. And so you're kind of busting a gut, really, you know. Yeah, 5 o'clock again, you know. But because it's Jonathan, you know, you just kind of bite the bullet and you know, and come in. He's fabulous. He's a rare director in as much as he's an actor's director. He has great ideas. I mean, like I said, you know, considering we've been doing this for 7 years, he can come up with new stuff. And he's got the kind of personality that everyone likes him. I don't know if you noticed out there. The crew love him, we love him, So there's this really great feeling that everyone is trying their hardest to make this the best product that we can. That's an ideal situation, as far as I'm concerned, in movie making.
Jonathan is really, he's relaxed and full of a lot of fun, and he really enjoys doing this. It's a wonderful crew. You know, they know the parameters, what they're working with, and what to go for, and how to tell the story that they have to tell. They feel comfortable with each other. They know their characters, and I must say, it's a wonderful story.
To the Phoenix. May she rest in peace. Oh. Okay. That wasn't so good.
One of Marina's finest hours, I think. I was a fly in the wall.
Now this, dear.
Deanna!
When we shot The Master, you could tell that the scene was going to last. There was not much need to sweeten it up, not much need to cover it, because it played. And, you know, one of the giveaways is when the crew laughs. They're all jaded. They've all been there before. They've seen stuff before. But when, you know, when you hear a little snicker out of a grip in a corner, you think, ooh, something good just happened.
Don't go criticizing my counseling techniques.
Sorry.
The drunk scene just surprised the heck out of me, because I had tried to make Troy funny in the past. It really didn't work. I basically thought, this is how nuts I am, I basically thought that Troy had no comic timing, even though Marina did. And I know that sounds just wacky, but I honestly believed that. And so over the years, you know, I would try to do something, and Jonathan would say, Marina, don't do that, it's not funny. So I stopped trying to be funny. And I asked Rick Berman, why is Troy, you know, the one? And true to Rick, he said, well, there's a line in the scene that says, you know, I've been trying to keep his hands off me for the last 20 minutes. Yeah, if the boys had said that, it'd be a whole different movie.
Action and shake.
It's corny to say, but it's only corny because it's true. It was a delight to be back with the family again.
It hasn't been that much of a reunion for the cast because we see each other all the time, but it's fun to have the characters hang around each other again. It's fun for, you know, Data to talk to Picard again, and for Data and Geordi to see one another.
I believe I am feeling anxiety. It is an intriguing sensation. The most distracting.
Data, I'm sure it's a fascinating experience, but perhaps you should deactivate your emotion chip for now.
Good idea, sir.
The bridge particularly is sort of like, we've always kind of related to it as a nightclub, you know, where all our friends come.
It has been so much fun to be back. I must say, it just got better and better, and when we finally hit the bridge, it has been
pretty much out of control. And we're so comfortable in our spacesuits, as they say, and so comfortable with who we are and with each other that, you know, it's like nothing I've ever been involved with.
Mr. Hawk, pursuit course. Engage.
Cut! That's great. Oh, no!
It gets really raucous on the bridge. It rarely gets to that point on any other set, but somehow the bridge feels like a stage.
Our attitude about doing Star Trek is that it is essential that we have a good time while we're doing this. We always get the work done, but that was really a hallmark of all of the years on Next Generation, that we laughed so much every day. And there was no reason to change that policy.
We do have a great time. I think we have a great time to the point of sometimes the crew are like, when are these guys going to stop messing around and maybe we could get home half an hour earlier, you know?
You know, the view screen's in front of us, but for those who aren't, you know, on our set, they don't see that it's just a big open space with an audience out there looking at us. So I think our performance genes go into gear, you know, and we just start rolling. And the bridge is always the most fun place for us to work.
I think what you see on the screen is my friendship, Marina's friendship with Brent. I think that's what you see in a lot of the character relationships, is our own friendships as people, and they come through the characters.
Riker and Picard are are very good friends, and that friendship and respect has been developed over the years. And it's inevitable that it's a bleed through from the relationship that Patrick and I have. And I think the writers have written to that. And the same thing is true of the relationship between Data and Picard. There's a respect that Picard has for Data that Patrick has for Brent, and vice versa. And the writers have written to those relationships very effectively, I think.
It's easy to know who you are because you're walking into something that's established. It's not like everybody trying to find out who each of them is at the same time. I can't tell you. It was, yes, I wouldn't let Marty hear me say this, but, you know, it's the kind of thing you do for free.
People have a real special place in their hearts for Star Trek. I think for its idealism and for the hope that it speaks of, the hopefulness that it holds for us and for our future. People, I think, feel like they have been enhanced by Star Trek and have a vested interest in seeing that go on, seeing that continue.
I really think it is committed to Roddenberry's ideas of equality and diversity and seeking the truth and seeking the good and a wonderful sense of adventure.
Engage!
Good storytelling is the basis of all drama, whether it's film or theater or radio. And Gene was passionate about telling interesting stories, keeping people in their seat, wanting to know what will happen next.
Is that Earth?
That's it.
It's so small.
It's about to get a whole lot bigger.
Then there is the fundamental optimism of the series which colors everything. The sense that our civilization will continue, will get better, and those best qualities of mankind will finally become dominant, and other civilizations will be influenced for their good by them.
My God. They're really from another world.
And they're going to want to meet the man that flew that warp ship.
It puts out, without being sententious or propagandist, it puts out a strong affirmative message about humankind. Star Trek is epic in scale. It's mythological. It's deeply serious and deeply entertaining, and has figures in it who are of larger-than-life stature.
Live long and prosper.
And there is also, in addition, something that is distinctively poetic as well about the whole Star Trek ethos.
First Contact encompassed a lot of artists and craftsmen in various different ways and different means. And so what we'd like to do now is look at some of the artwork that was behind these other artists and the ideas and images that they had conceived.
Y tus trailers, visita mi canal.
Perhaps today is a good day to die. Prepare for rubbing speed!
Sir, there's another starship coming in. It's the Enterprise.
First Contact was actually one of the last Star Trek films where we actually exploited miniatures from ILM. It was right at the turning point when we were about to turn into CG elements for the films and the TV shows. Deep Space was about getting ready to go to CG as well. And First Contact was probably one of the first big times I got to work with the guys at ILM. They came up with a kind of a dimension of about 11 and a half, 12 feet for the finished ship. And what they wanted to do to save time was cast the Enterprise in a clear material of fiberglass resin that's clear, mask the windows and paint, and then peel off so they could have the light elements inside. They had a lot of trouble with the material coming out of the molds tacky, and so they fought with that battle. It didn't work out too well, so they went with kind of a gel coat, which is another fiberglass-based material, but it's opaque. And so they had to literally cut every window out, and they came up with the idea, let's drop little slides of all the sets from the Enterprise D inside. So when we go by, you'd actually get not just a light image, you would actually get a reflection of a window and something behind it as it would go by. They also had tons of painting problems, everything you could think of. These poor guys went through. They wound up getting the model done in time, started shooting, started filming. They had light leaks to deal with, every possible thing. So watching the film, you can definitely see where they used the miniature, where it wouldn't hold up, and that's where John Nolan will go, let's do a CG version. I think one of the first big shots you see the CG models when you have the Defiant being attacked and the Enterprise flies over. I think that was one of their very first CG shots. And you can kind of see a little bit of difference between how the CG model looks according to the way it's lit, as opposed to the miniature, which is the first shot when it comes out into the nebula where it's starting to make its big bank for the first shot. And I remember seeing that. That was the first time I actually got to see it lit on film when we watched it at the premiere. We all snuck over to the Chinese theater. I remember I was really worried, wondering how it would be taken, because it was such a far departure from the architecture of the D. And I remember the whole crowd was kind of going, ooh, ooh, so you didn't know if it was good ooze or bad ooze, but it was amazing to work with the ILM guys. Before working as an illustrator, I was a model maker, worked in the model companies, and I worked for Greg Jean at the time, and we had a lot of versions of the Enterprise D we had to make for Next Generation. And from a model point of view and a filming point of view, the design by Andy Probert was basically a big scientific ship, a lot of families, a lot of science, and the design lent itself to that. On a filming point of view, there were only 2 or 3 good angles that you could film it from. It was a very, very saucer-heavy miniature, and it would, putting the perspective on it with the camera would really overpower the back part of the ship, so they had to be very careful how they filmed it. When we were doing the Enterprise E, the whole concept of it is it wasn't a science vessel anymore. This was basically designed to attack the Borg. The threat of the Borg was coming, they knew it, so they needed an Enterprise that was more battle-worthy to handle that. So design-wise, I took it back to the older Enterprises with the real sleek, long body lines, the nacelles, put a little bit more structure behind it that would make it look like it carry the speeds that they do. Kind of get rid of the weakened points like the neck, as you remember in Star Trek II. That neck, I thought if they would have hit it just a little harder, it would have separated. And so, being the Borg's a much more formidable enemy, I thought that we could take that neck out, kind of make it a more streamlined shape, just for battling this. They pretty much approved it as the architecture developed itself. A lot of sweeping lines, not necessarily a sporty look to it, but more a structural look. And Rick Berman also liked the fact that we went back with longer nacelles. Voyager was going at the same time, and I had never seen Voyager up to that point. So when I started doing my concepts and they started going through, Rick Berman goes, oh, this is good. This is kind of showing the flow that the Voyager is gone. So it was ironic that 2 different departments came up with kind of the same ideas in just different styles. And ironically, Rick Sternbach, who pretty much did the design for the Voyager, did the blueprints for the Enterprise E for the ILM guys. I knew I had an open palette on the design sense of it, just based that it was going to be a more military vehicle than your standard Enterprise. And so sketch-wise, I started coming up with things, and the thoughts that always passed through my mind, what would it look like, a longer, sleeker Enterprise, a tougher Enterprise, one that would handle Warp 9 speeds for longer periods of time. And I came up with a real fine, thin shape one day, and I really liked it. It had kind of the shorter nacelles on it, but the shape was really nice, and we showed that to Mr. Berman. He goes, I like this a lot, let's carry it through. And we went whole gambits of swept wings on the nacelles, all kinds of things. The saucer was the first thing we worked out, and we went with that forward-facing oval, which would kind of give you the presence of power and the sleekness of the shape. From there, we started merging the body in, eliminating the neck, and then started working on the nacelles. And as more what Matt Jeffries and Bill George had done with the original Enterprise and the Excelsior, the longer nacelles just seemed to balance that design out. So we presented a sketch of that with those nacelles. Mr. Berman liked it. And so we pretty much went from there, did a finished sketch, went through all the approval process, and they said, okay, let's get started on the plans. Probably all in all, sketch-wise, 30 to 40 original sketches before I got the shape that I really liked. And then from there, it was just a matter of pretty much finessing it. So they were very happy with the shape right away. For the battle scene, ILM had an art director that was working with the visual effects guys. Alex Yeager was his name. And his job primarily was to design Federation ships for the battle that didn't look like an Enterprise. So, of course, you have the saucer and the nacelles. They wanted those primarily to be the shapes for Federation ships and Starfleet ships. So he took just various ideas, kind of made a faceted saucer, made round saucers where the nacelles were attached, all types of different variations. And so all his designs look extremely Federation without being easily mistaken for the Enterprise in a battle scene.
Welcome aboard the Enterprise E, Mr. Worf. Thank you, sir. The Defiant. Adrift, but salvageable.
Tough little ship.
Little?
The Defiant existed as a miniature that we had used for Deep Space Nine, of course. And for First Contact, they made a CG miniature as well as the full-size miniature. It was a little bit of both as well. They had to add a lot of battle damage to it because it's already been in the battle pretty heavily before it gets rescued by the Enterprise E. And so it was a little bit of both CG and the practical miniature. The Phoenix was a very, very fun design, and first we went out, got some research on the Titan II missiles, which is basically what is in those silos. Came up with an idea with a cone that we could build and actually drop on the missile itself. So in reality, the only part in that silo that is pretty much fictitious is the nozzle on the bottom, which we had to build, and the cone. The missile had been declassified and pretty much disassembled for the peace treaty that was made with Russia. And so they took sections of the rocket out, center pieces where you could actually see through, where ballistics would go, and the cone, so it would be inoperative. So basically we had to build that nozzle as well. We thought we could do a separation like with the Apollo rockets where the lunar module was housed, where once it gets in space it separates, the little doors break off, and the Phoenix is housed within that structure. So we did kind of a mathematical breakdown of what the solid fuel booster would be versus the Phoenix. And so once did the breakaway, thought it'd be very fun design-wise to have kind of an open frame skeletal ship where it looks like it was more experimental as opposed to an actual finished design. So we had an open framework around the bottom of the nozzle. So it made it very mechanical, kind of took a lot of technology that was older and existing to make the ignition of this basic ship. To tie it in with the Star Trek universe is where the nacelles came from. Pretty much designed those where they're housed inside the rocket. There was really not a lot of room to work with. If I'm not mistaken, it was a 10-foot width that the Titan was. And then putting it inside the framework made it even a little bit smaller. And dealing with the ILM guys, they were going to have to make this in a miniature with a mechanism that would drop the nacelles out. So we did it where they're housed, basically touching side by side inside. And a little framework and a little structure that would make them fold out. And the guys up at ILM did a fabulous job working around the confined space. And so when it's all ejected, ready for light speed, the nacelles come out. You see all the engine lights ramp up for the big shot. The Vulcan ship was really a fun vessel. At that time, there was very little Vulcan spaceship design. Basically, I think there were two ships. We had the shuttle from the motion picture, which was basically kind of a two-part vessel. You had an engine body and a separation piece on top. It was another miniature that Mark Stetson had built, and he was another primary miniature maker at the time, and it did a really beautiful motion control move. I remember watching that thinking maybe we could do something that had the same two-part separation or had a beautiful roll to it on film. And that was the basic inspiration for where the ship came from. I didn't want to copy it because at that time, double nacelle ships were very new. They weren't exploited a lot. From that time, there's so many shows that had taken that type of design and just kind of rearranged the elements. And I thought, let's go with something completely different. So as opposed to a functional architecture, let's go with something that's more artistic, basing that the Vulcans were very logical. They wanted something that not only flew, but had kind of a symbol or a statement to it. One of the first drawings I had done was this kind of starfish three-point design. And we submitted a quick sketch, and Mike Kuta saw it, and he goes, I don't think that will make it. It's kind of bizarre for what the ideas that they approved would go for. So we sent it in anyways and came back with a star on it. And it goes, continue with this design, and we were all very happy. And he goes, I really wanted that to go, but I wasn't going to get your hopes up. Basically from the top, like I said, it's a starfish, three-point starfish, and we came up with an idea where the legs are folded up with the body. And so when it goes to land, these legs will fold out and will do this twist, so you have two elements twisting at the same time to come down for the land. So as the legs are descending, they're also doing a counter rotation. So from the top point of view, again, your three-point star has now become a six-point star, and it would do this beautiful landing. This was in the show. They wind up not making a miniature for it because the budget was already pretty much over at this point. Pacific Ocean Post were the people that wound up being the miniature makers. Dave Takamura was the CG supervisor on it. And I never saw the miniatures as they were being made. I made a little miniature about this big because a lot of the angles, I was very new to the illustration world at that time, and that was a drawing that was almost out of my comprehension to perceive. So I made a miniature basic for myself to get the angles off of. I sent that over, and they used it as their kind of template model. When I finally saw it in the film, I remember Jerry Goldsmith was the composer, and he had always been an outside inspiration of when I was drawing. I'd always use his music to listen to as I was drawing. I always thought, wouldn't it be great to do something where Jerry Goldsmith did a score to something I had worked on? And I remember the shot of the ship coming out of the clouds and the music, and it was one of those moments where I always felt it was like a very satisfying high point in my career, in my life. It's having that image come out of the sky and Jerry's score playing as it went on. And he just recently passed away, sadly, because he was such a huge contributor not only to the motion picture world but Star Trek as well. And he added that second life that just the images wouldn't be able to portray in reality. For the Vulcan foot, we had to build a full-size piece because we have interaction with the actors. And so kind of based it on a boomerang shape. And it was ironic how that shape lent itself to the set, because we did a wraparound that we built actually in the Angeles Crest Forest. And we did a doorway in the center, and it was at that point where we thought, what kind of doorway could we come up with that would be very alien, very different, and very mysterious, because you're not supposed to know it's the Vulcans till they actually exit the ship. So we did a play where the door itself is the ramp. So when the door actually opens up, it's like a three-part effect. One part of the door goes up while the bottom part of the door comes down and forms the ramp. And then you have two little side doors that open up. So that all took place on this set. For the first part of the foot landing, you get a CG element where it comes down and the doors open up. Then you go into the practical. It was a pretty seamless matchup between the two. I thought with that boomerang shape, how could we incorporate it to have a function? So in the design where the legs are attached to the engines, that boomerang shape actually kind of forms kind of like a thrust ring around the engine so the jets can fire through it without interrupting the design of the ship. So that's kind of where that boomerang shape came from. So it had like a double function as not only being a landing foot, but also part of the engine in flight.